to the people of India, the history that they knew only came after the British came into India and started writing their histories. Before that, for the Indians, it was the Itihasa, which was the Puranic texts. Now, Itihasa or history for them, which was written in the Puranas, was very different from whatever political changes were taking place. But when the Britishers came in and started writing their histories, it was always directed towards bringing the Indian civilization down and also to discriminate upon the history writing in itself. When Britishers took to writing the history of its colony, it wrote about how India as a civilization was very backward and there was no chance for India to gain that sort of consciousness or awaken. And it seemed like the British was here to civilize the barbaric Indians. Now, contrary to that, we see a lot of other people, other British Englishmen, come forward and write histories about India that was very different from the ones that were being written at that point of time. These people tried to showcase how India was a rich, cultural, unified place, which was diverse in its past as well as its present. These people who focused on the truthful writing of Indian present structures as well as the histories that have gone by were called the Orientalists. These Orientalists focused upon bringing about the true nature of the Indian society as well as the Indian culture. One of them, and the pioneers in doing so, was Sir William Jones. Sir William Jones brought about several aspects in the writing of India's history as well as developing certain changes which showcased India as having a diverse cultural background. So what did he do? He established firstly the Asiatic Society in 1784, which was to explore India's past. And why were the Britishers interested to explore India's past? That is because in order to rule India, they would have to know about the Indians and the Indian society. Now, this urge to know about the Indian society increased after the revolt of 1857 because they had to understand the masses that they were to rule upon. He assisted the codification of Hindu and Muslim laws and published them as the Institutes of Hindu Law in 1794 as well as the Mohammedan Law of Inheritance in 1792. So Sir William Jones, who was primarily a foreigner, an Englishman who came from a foreign land altogether, he came in and started to read about India in the Sanskrit Puranic texts. Now, once he started to gain knowledge about the Indian languages and the way India has been written down in the Vedas, Upanishads as well as Puranas, he started to translate these as well and he gained an idea about what was exactly happening in India and why was it happening. Because see, these people who came from outside did not know the land. Now, it was also important for these Britishers to realize what kind of a colony they were to rule upon in order to govern it properly, to govern the people properly. So we see that ideally all these policies were driven in fact to get to know about the colonial land. Now, he also was the first to suggest that Sanskrit was an ancient language like Greek and Egyptian. So, Orientalists primarily brought forward the idea and stated that the Indian language Sanskrit was in fact as old as ancient languages like Greek and Egyptian and belonged to the ancient languages category. So you see how exactly these changes that was brought forward by Orientalists per se, Sir William Jones, and the steps he took to establish the position of India in its past itself was enriching. Now, he was also the translator of various Sanskrit texts like Kalidasa's Abhigyana Shakuntalam into English. So, you can understand the fact that these initiatives that were being taken by the Orientalists in a way, of course, positioned India's past in a better light, in a better sort of vision. But not only that, it was making it easier for the British colonizers to realize where and who they were governing. So these also became the historical set of factors that showcase the Indians their true nature. Indians now could, read about their past and get to acknowledge the rich past that they had, and also they sensed, this belonging to the past, this belonging to the roots, to the origins that was common to the Indian people. We see that Orientalists like Charles Wilkins translated the Bhagavad Gita into English in 1785, whereas on the other hand, Frederick Max Mueller translated various ancient religious texts, including that of Rig Veda, in 50 volumes of the sacred books of the East. So it was titled as the sacred books of the East. So thus we can understand that these steps were being taken in order to make, in fact, the Indian people realize that they had a rich past. Certain advancements came forward when there were breakthroughs happening in writing of history. Now this only happened when archaeological breakthroughs were happening, and we can see the deciphering of the ancient Ashokan edicts that was done by James Prinsep provided a proud piece of history for the Indians. Now this particular edict was a major pillar edict of Ashoka, which is in Lauria, Araraj in Bihar. Now, all these advancements, all these breakthroughs were happening in that point of time when Indians are realizing time and again that they had a very instrumental past that made India what it was. Now, at this point of time, we see that under Sir Alexander Cunningham, who was the Director General of Archaeological Survey of India, there were several Sachi stupas and other stupas that were being found out, that were being excavated. So breakthrough excavations were also happening, and we see that such archaeological gems being found that clearly showcase that India was a civilization that had varied cultural past, which was very enriching. It was also at this point of time that a very instrumental excavation happened, and we see Dayaram Sahani finding out Harappan remains and Rakhaldas Banerjee discovering Mohenjo-daro. The Harappan remains were found in 1921, whereas that of Mohenjo-daro in 1922. And these findings actually came as a refutal to the common notion of the way James Mill had written the history of India, where he stated that Indian civilization was a very backward civilization, and it wasn't really enriching, or the people of India did not have any roots. So these breakthrough discoveries that were happening showcase this entire fact that India in fact was a much older civilization than what happened in Great Britain. So the civilizations in Britain and Europe came much later than that of India. So the discoveries that were happening helped to refute the claims that India was uncivilized before the advent of the British, and rather showed that Indian civilizations existed before the civilization dawned in Britain. These discoveries gave a lot of pride to the people of India when they realized that it was not the British who were coming and saving and establishing Western education, thus bringing India out of the dark age. Rather, India always had it in itself because it was a culturally enriched civilization that had existed from times immemorial. So, in order to quickly recapitulate the historical factors that bind the Indian people together and developed a bond of pride, a bond of brotherhood and fraternity. The first is we see the British efforts of the Orientalists to unveil India's past helped to acquaint Indians with their rich historical past, as well as contributed to enhancing the national pride and the nationalistic ideals that these people, the Indians, were gaining. William Jones, who was an Orientalist, established Asiatic Society of India in 1784 to conduct research on India's past, also translated Sanskrit texts into English and compiled and published the Muslim law and the Hindu law. So primarily all these instrumental books that had been written primarily in some other language, in the indigenous languages, native vernacular languages, they were translated into English so that wider people could read it, and essentially the British colonizers could get to know exactly about India's rich past. Important translations were made by other European scholars like that of Max Mueller. The archaeological discoveries rejected the age-old British notion that Indians were savages before the advent of British. So it, put into focus that Britishers were not invincible, and it also showcased the fact that, the picture that Britishers created of themselves of being the savior for Indians to bring them out from the dark ages, that was changed entirely when Indian people realized that the power of knowledge lay in their hands to overthrow this particular domination of the colonizers. Now, in order to take the national movement forward, it was important for the Indians to meet, converge and discuss as to how they would want to take the movement forward. Now, it was also important to know what was happening in the country, and that is where the exact role of the Indian press comes in. At that point of time, there were various papers that were being written in the vernaculars as well as in English. For example, if you look at your screens, you will see that the Amrit Bazar Patrika has been written in Bengali and in English. Now, Amrit Bazar Patrika was primarily written in Bengali, but after the Vernacular Press Act came out, which was especially targeted towards this paper, it had to bring out an edition in English as well. So we see that, this is an example of its Bengali edition of 1872. So we see that after the Vernacular Press Act, which was directed especially against this paper, Amrit Bazar Patrika simply published only their English edition in 1896 to criticize the British policies. So we understand that the press, the newspapers did not stop, criticizing the British policies or did not stop reporting about what was happening in the countries. Therefore, they were, delivering certain roles. Now, what exactly did the press do? First of all, we see that it kept the people informed about the various political developments that were happening in the country. Second, it exposed failure of the government. So the way the British government was exploiting, the way the British government was failing to deal with the masses, that was also reflected on these papers. Now, it also brought news of the international world to the people, because it was important at this point of time to know how other colonies or the international sector was dealing with the colonizers or with the other powers. They also facilitated exchange of thought on a mass scale, so people could now meet and discuss as to how they would want to take it forward, what exactly was happening where. And finally, we see that the press played a dominant role in instilling the feeling of patriotism. So this entire factor of nationalism only came when they had the knowledge of what they should, be discussing about, what is the next step that they would take and how they could shape this national movement. Like that of the press, transportation was also a very important factor in carrying these changes, carrying these ideas and notions of nationalism and patriotism. When railways came to India, when the first train ran, from Bombay to Thane in 1853, it was seen by the Britishers as an administrative change that they had brought by, because the railways and the communication system, that of telegraph, was also established by the Britishers so that they could get better at administering, move quickly, and it was only for themselves that they had established this. But both the railways as well as telegram that was initiated in India became a tool for change, became a tool for the growth of nationalism for the Indians as well. Now this became the carrier of change again, because now the Indians could go from one place to the other quicker, sit for discussions, and there was this exposure that they got due to these changes in the communication system. So as communication system developed, we see that people are also developing, because they are getting to know other people who are coming from other areas, and there is a lively discussion about what changes can be brought by and how the people can move out of this exploitative nature that the government had.
When he arrived in 1848, Dalhousie had plans that would change India forever. In 1853, he proposed a revolutionary modern railway network designed to link up the four corners of the sub. By 1870, over 1,000 British-built locomotives were puffing their way across the subcontinent as the network rapidly expanded.
The first railway track was laid down from Bombay to Thane in 1853. Now, as you saw in the video, it was the British who had laid down the track, but it was the Indians who had worked for it. So, in fact, later we see that the railways become one of the most important factors that led to the propagation of nationalism. So in order to quickly recapitulate the communication and transportation factors that gave push to the growth of Indian nationalism, first was the vernacular and English newspapers helped to educate Indians on the modern ideologies and current world affairs and gave them a platform to criticize unjust policies. So the more the papers wrote, the more the press came out with stories from everywhere. Indians got to know what exactly was happening. They were informed, they were awakened by the proper news that was being reported. Next we see, with the development of modes of transport and communication, it helped to spread nationalist ideas among people, because not only could people move from one place to the other, but they could move faster, meet faster, and thus give rise to the mobility that the Indian national movement required. Modern transport in the form of railways helped nationalist leaders and workers to converge in order to consolidate their ideas and disperse in order to organize national movements in different parts of India. So these transportation and communication system not only brought people from various places in India, they also brought together the leaders where they could discuss and plan the next action that they would take up and how they could organize the various movements in various areas. So ultimately what it did was it sped up the process of this entire communication system and also the national movement. Thus we saw that all these factors, from historical, geographical, political to communicative, that developed during this point of time under the British rule actually were the factors that gave an impetus to the growth of nationalism, which would ultimately bring the patriotic fervor in the Indian people who would rise up in the Indian national movement against the domination of the British colonizer. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at deltastep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million plus questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly, learn via games, and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.